This is the Bigger Pockets Podcast, show 809.
In a season of life where I had very little income and our savings was just completely depleted, I had a property that I was able to sell. And the day that my second daughter was born, we closed on this property. And it was the first time I'd ever sold anything. And I just remember going, this saved us. This put us in a position to survive.
What's going on, everyone? It's David Green, your host of the Bigger Pockets Podcast. And in case you forgot, we are the biggest, the best, and the baddest real estate podcast in the world. Every week, bringing you stories, how-tos, and answers that you need to make smart decisions in real estate now, in this current market, under these current conditions, which is where you got to make your decisions. Today, we've got an awesome show for you. Rob and I are joined by Corey Kent, a country music singer whose career is exploding. Check out his album Blacktop. He's going to be touring with Jason Aldean. And we talked a little bit about his music career and a lot about his real estate portfolio. Corey has an incredible story. From starting off sleeping in trundle beds, sharing a $250 room with someone else and eating nothing but chicken and rice, to being one of the biggest stars in country music today and using real estate to supplement some of his wealth along with the family that he's creating. I mean, we get into everything from living in the country, buying raw land, how to negotiate, what to look for in these deals, partnering with other people, short-term rentals. Like, there's a lot of stuff. Rob, what do you think people should keep an eye out for to help them with their own portfolio success?
I think this is a very inspiring episode for many reasons, but I think the number one reason is that Corey really reiterated throughout the episode that real estate has not been his main thing. And even then, even the fact that it has not been the focus, it has really helped him create wealth. It has helped him through certain financial situations that he faced during COVID. And it just goes to show that investing, even in small ways and doing it consistently, you always have a plan B through real estate if you can hold on to it.
But before we get to Corey, today's quick tip is, if you like Corey's album Blacktop, keep an eye out for my next album, Green Top. It'll be even better. Just kidding. The real quick tip is going to be, always look at the school system where you're going to be buying. If you don't know where to start, possibly consider thinking about raw land. There's less competition for these assets. And if you're a value add investor, there's lots of ways that you can buy raw land, improve it, and then sell it to a developer for quite the handsome profit. Speaking of handsome profits, Rob, do you want to predict the future?
Do I want to predict the future? No, but I will say that at the barber shop, my haircut is called the Rob Top. So for those of you that are asking, like, hey, what I tell my barber, just call it the Rob Top.
That is actually very funny. Let us know in the comments what you think about Rob's hair, my potential for a Green Top album, and Corey's interview. Let's bring him in. Corey Kent, welcome to the Bigger Pockets Podcast. Nice to have you on today. For those who don't know Corey, he's been investing for a total of 6 years. He started at the ripe old age of 22. Very impressive. Rob, I don't know what you were doing at 22, but it probably wasn't buying a bunch of houses and being cool. In the past 3 years, you've done 6 deals. You've done long-term rentals, short-term rentals, invested in land, and house hacked, all while being a musician by day. And that's kind of downplaying what you're actually doing here. We'll let you talk about your career in a minute. You're a father of 3 kids. Don't know how you did that. I could barely manage 3 houses. You're also doing this while being a dad. And fun fact, you just released an album called Blacktop. Everybody should go check that out as you're listening to the show. Google Corey Kent Blacktop and get that. Thanks for being here with us, Corey.
Man, so excited. A fan of the show, and obviously have some real estate interests, and everything's kind of culminating. My music career led me here, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and shout out to your manager, George Corey, who reached out to me years ago. He was also a fan of the show and met Brandon Turner and then met me. He's been a very cool guy in a lot of ways. So before we get into your backstory here, music is one of the jobs that takes so much time and attention. I imagine that you're pursuing a more passive real estate strategy. How many hours a week are you spending on your real estate portfolio currently?
Yeah, so I'm a very passive real estate investor, meaning I don't have a lot of time to give to it. There was a point where I was a little more, in the super education, like I knew nothing. And I had to educate myself. So that was a period of time where I was spending a lot more time per week on it. I would say now, if it's not pretty much an autopilot investment, if I don't feel like I can get it to that point, then it's probably not a fit for me. I would say a rough estimate, I'm spending maybe 2 hours a week on my real estate investments. I've sacrificed some profit just for the sake of not having a headache. So I have property managers in place, and I'm taking a more long-term approach to a lot of these properties, whereas early on I was trying to wheel and deal a little more.
Sure. And tell us, I mean, obviously being a musician, kind of at your level, your schedule must be kind of crazy.
So there's relatively no routine, but we're trying to make some routine out of the crazy lifestyle that we have.
Man, that's really cool. Well, everyone stick around until the very end because Corey's actually going to be performing. No, I'm just kidding. Imagine if we just dropped that on you. Okay, so that's awesome, man. And I love to hear it. You're a very down-to-earth guy, dude. We were just chatting before this for a bit. Can you tell us a little bit about your life before you found real estate? What was your family like? And any lessons that came from their influence?
Totally. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, and I think the main lesson that I've learned from each of them is you get out of it what you put into it, right? I've seen a lot of people in my family hustle their way into a great life, and my grandfather has a big cattle operation, and thousands of acres. He's the one that taught me how to invest in land and kind of what to look for, what he looks for when buying property. And that's kind of where the real estate bug appeared in my life. I just saw what he was able to build for himself. He bought some property when he was just starting a family, and the list price, he tells me, was like $300 an acre. And he wanted it because he knew the guy, his father-in-law owned the piece next door. And he said, if that guy wants that property, then I want the property next to it, because I think he's wise. And he overbids on this property because there's multiple offers on it. He ends up buying it at $1,000 an acre, and everybody thought he was absolutely insane. And now frontage on the road in the town is going for $120,000 to $250,000 an acre in this town. Now, granted, that's 50 years later, but he bought up thousands of acres. So he was the guy that opened my mind to, wow, there's things that I can do outside of my daily job that can help provide for my family. I can be wise with what I create and I generate to reinvest to further my life and my family. And then outside of that, just seeing the freedom that comes along with being your own boss in whatever capacity that might be. My mom owned a clothing store, a women's boutique for 20 something years. My dad has his own law firm. For me, I became a musician, and I just approached it like a business, even though it's not the most businessy thing that you could do. It's what my skill set was. And I've enjoyed the freedom that comes along with, controlling my own time.
Yeah, man, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, having a family of entrepreneurs, you kind of grow up in that environment. I'm sure it really influences a lot for you, right? So would you say that entrepreneurial mindset influenced your choice to pursue music?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I saw a photo. I graduated college 2016 from Oklahoma State. And you get to write on top of your cap, your graduation cap. It's kind of like a thing there. Well, for me, I wrote never made a resume on top of my cap, because I went to school with the mentality of I'm going to learn as much as I can, and I'm going to network, and I'm going to just take in life experience. For me, I was taking in ammunition to write songs. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to have an education, but I did not want to have a backup plan. So I didn't apply for jobs. I didn't make a resume. I went and got an education, and then I went and chased my dream. And that was definitely a result of being raised with an open mind of like, I can go and start a business. I can hustle. I can live simply until I get where I want to go, until I get my business off the ground. And it took quite a while, but I was able to, do pretty well.
Man, that's so cool. So you really didn't give yourself a plan B.
No, I definitely knew what I wanted to go after. And my mentality and my personality have always been, I guess, high risk tolerant. I see, like, I'm 20, I just turned 29. So I see myself as like I have a position where I can swing for the fences and strike out and lose everything and still by 35 rebuild everything. I see the advantage of my age, and therefore it makes me a little more apt to take some big swings. And especially coming out of college, I was like, man, I don't have any money anyways. I might as well go after what I want to go after. And the jobs are always going to be there. I got my business degree, but I didn't want to settle for anything less than what I was passionate about. And that's where this podcast and real estate, and that's why I'm here, is because real estate enabled me to keep chasing that dream, even when the dream wasn't paying for itself. And so it has a really cool place in my journey of just keeping my dream alive.
Yeah. So music can be a notoriously fickle business. Do you remember anything that you did before your career really gained some traction to save some money, like what you were eating or how you just survived?
Oh man. Yeah. I have a horrible example for you, but actually it was so prevalent. We had a house, a bunch of my buddies and I had a house in college, and the rooms were like $250 a room. So it's already cheap. Well, me and my best friend, who now lives 7 houses down from me in Texas, and he's raising his family right next door, we decided $250 wasn't cheap enough. So we split the room. So we like living in, or sleeping on trundle beds. So one bed folded under the next. And while I was living in that house, every day I ate canned chicken and rice for lunch and dinner.
I feel like I'm talking to a young me. This is my whole life, man.
I remember I had a mentor that was like, live like nobody else lives now so that you can live like no one else lives later. And that just stuck with me. I just remember going, okay, when I'm married, when I have a family, I don't want to have to like really scrimp and just get by. I want to be able to do the things that I've always envisioned doing with my family. And so I'm going to live really simply now so that I can set myself up well later. And, you know, my mentality has evolved since that point, but I think there's something good about, you know, being uncomfortable, and making yourself be creative. And, so that to the extent that my roommates from that house of like almost 7 years ago now, the roommates from that house texted me after I signed my record deal, and they were like, congratulations, man. We're so happy for you. Does this mean you're not eating canned chicken and rice anymore? It was such a funny moment, man. But I value those days, you know, it taught me a lot.
So you moved to Nashville at 17, and that was the first time that you tried to buy a house. This was like your initial foray into real estate, which is crazy that you're doing that at 17, man. Like I was still in high school at 17. What happened on that deal?
Yeah. So I was driving around Nashville, and East Nashville was kind of the place that I felt like I could afford to buy a house at 17 years old. I don't know why I thought I could afford that. It just seemed reasonably priced, I guess. But basically I went to the bank and said, hey, I found this house. It's $120,000. I think I can buy it. I can rent a room out. I can definitely handle this payment. And they looked at me and they were like, absolutely not. We're not giving you any money. And I went, well, why not? Like, I know I can make this payment. Look at my income. Now, it wasn't great, but it could cover the payment, right? And the response was, well, you don't have any credit. And I was like, well, how do I get credit? And they were like, well, you don't have any, so that's going to be tough to do. And so I went to my parents. I said, how do I get credit? How do I establish credit as a 17-year-old kid? And my parents really didn't have a great answer for me either. So I basically walked back into the bank and I said, here's $500. Can you give me some sort of credit and just take this? If I don't pay it back, you can keep the $500. And they were like, oh, a secured line of credit. It's like, whatever you want to call it. Right. And that is the first time that I even knew what credit was. That sounds horrible. Like I knew what a credit card was and what it did, but I didn't know how to go get one. And so I just started there. And obviously I didn't get to buy the house. And wouldn't you know, at that same house, I watched it sell for like $400,000 a couple of years ago. So my sniffer was working, but I didn't have the means to do it. But it sent me down a path of like that. I have a lot that I need to learn. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about, like, if you talk to my friends in my band, I'm passionate about helping people make their first purchase in real estate, because there's nobody that had less knowledge or resource than I did just on the onset. I just had to start from absolute scratch and go figure out how to get in a position to buy something. And I'm super glad that I have, because like I said, it set my family up really well. But that's where it all started.
Yeah. So you start building up the credit side of things. You obviously get rejected on this house, but what is that moment like? Are you defeated, and are you like, okay, this isn't for me? Or were you just willing to sort of go through the process to get you to the first house? What was that mindset at that time?
Man, I mean, I was 17. I was super naive, but like, the world was a big adventure to me. Like, I graduated high school a year early to move to Nashville to, chase a dream of writing songs. And when I got there, I realized, hey, it's probably cheaper if I buy a house than to rent one from somebody. So let me try to go buy one. Oh man, there's a whole nother world that I know nothing about. Now I'm intrigued. And this seems like a challenge, which, if you know anything about my personality, I love that. So I just felt like it was a good, healthy challenge. And I didn't think anything of it really, other than I want to try to figure this out. And yeah.
Yeah, cool. So for context, what was your household income at that time?
Oh my gosh. At 17, dude, I was like literally eating Subway $5 footlongs and having them split into thirds at the shop. Like, I go in the morning, I'd be like, can you make me bacon, egg, and cheese $5 footlong and split it into thirds? Cause that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I mean, maybe if I was lucky, I was making like $20,000. And that was just side hustles, like singing demos and crashing on friends' couches. I was sleeping in my truck at this point. When I overstayed my welcome on my friend's couch, there was no money to be had. And that's part of why really the bank was like, absolutely not. We're not going to loan you any money. You're a 17-year-old kid that is a freelance musician. So I get it. But yeah, you got to find ways to navigate around your circumstances. And a few years later, I was buying land and just kept going.
So your first official real estate deal wasn't actually a property because you couldn't get the loan. So what did you end up doing?
Yeah. So my first property was a raw piece of land in Williamson County, Tennessee, that we still have to this day. It's beautiful. It's just like it's like a 5.5 acre subdivided, rolling hills, beautiful trees property. And basically I knew that we couldn't go right out and buy a house at that point, but I knew that I wanted to get my feet wet in real estate. And my wife and I were living really simply, and we knew we had a little bit of money that we could either allocate towards savings or we could allocate towards something like land. And so I just kind of talked through this with my wife, and we reframed our mindset to, this land is going to be our savings. And that opened up our minds a little bit to the much more than it was to the possibility of being able to put ourselves in a position to go purchase something. Because I think a lot of people, at least people my age, their barrier to entry is like, I have to have a ton of money saved up. I have to have excess rolling in order to make my first purchase, or I got to have a lot sitting in an account somewhere. And really what it came down to is I had made a relationship with a bank, and they took a chance on me, and I bought this land, and I had it paid off within 2 years, even on super low income. And I just put every spare dollar that we had towards that, with the mentality of, this is our savings account. It's okay if there's not a lot left over at the end of every month, because this is our savings.
And so tell us about that piece of land. What did it cost? Did you have any partners on it? Was it just yours?
Yeah. So no partners on the land. I don't think we had a cosigner. Yeah. In fact, I know we didn't have a cosigner or anything. It was listed at, I want to say $135,000, and we got them to $119,000. And I was really feeling defeated by that. I remember going, man, if I can't get this at $100,000, then I feel like it's just too expensive. but I knew we could make the payment. I just was like on principle wanting to quote unquote like win the deal, win the negotiation. And so I remember my grandfather telling me like, hey, every piece of land that I've ever purchased felt a little too expensive. And in hindsight, it's always been a good move. And so, you know, within my parameters, I was like, this fits the description that I've heard my grandpa preach. And so I pulled the trigger on it. Even at closing, I was like, man, did we just get taken? Right. And then, you know, a couple years later, that property's doubled in price. And so it's been a great move, but it was, and I don't even know what we could actually get for it. I've just seen what other properties around have sold for, and it's more than double what we purchased for. So, and what it did was it allowed me, it gave me a tool in my tool belt. And what I mean by that is I now, 2 years after buying this piece of land, I had it paid off, and then I was able to use it as collateral to go move quickly on other deals, even when I didn't have the cash reserves right to move quickly.
So tell us what changed about your financial situation. Was the music side of your career starting to take off? Because, you know, we rewind a bit and, you know, just buying that, the bank basically said no, right? And they're like, no, thank you. And then now we fast forward to this land purchase that you buy. And then not only did you buy it, but you paid it off in 2 years. Was it always the plan to pay it off in 2 years?
I was very, very afraid of debt, like incredibly afraid of debt. Like very much so like Dave Ramsey, you should never buy anything that you can't pay for in cash and all that sort of stuff. And so this was a real risk for me. And so I wanted to pay it off as soon as possible because I felt like there was a monkey on my back. And that's how I learned about equity jail, right? Like I'm tying up all of this money and into something. I'm not sure it was the wisest use, but the only way that I've really ever been able to learn is firsthand. So that was a great learning experience for me. But what changed was I met somebody at a bank, a president of a small bank, and it kind of opened the conversation to, look, I don't have the typical income, but let me show you everything that I have. And they were willing to do like an in-house loan. And we did an adjustable rate mortgage. It wasn't a conventional loan of any sort. And they were able to just take a chance on a kid from Oklahoma. And it was a small Oklahoma bank. And I didn't really know it at the time, but what paying off that land in 2 years did was it built their faith in me, right? Like they went, oh shoot, this 22-year-old kid just knocked out his land note and now he's asking to buy a rental property. Yeah, maybe we'll take another swing on him. And so if I'm talking to my peers and my friends about their real estate investment, I'm saying, hey, look, I didn't have a lot when I started. I didn't make a lot when I started. And the most important thing I can tell you is build relationships, because that's what opened the door for me in the first place. And so I kind of measure everything now in my life by, can I pick up the phone and call or text somebody? Whether that's my lender or whether that's my manager or whether that's any part of my business. I want to have them at, you know, a quick response. And that has made all the difference in every purchase and sale that I've made since then, is just having a personal contact and relationship with each team member.
Yeah, that's an important skill, and arguably the most important skill to have, because you have to understand who to call instead of, you know, trying to figure out how to solve the problem yourself. And so, yeah, you said this piece of land was about $100,000. Were you making more money at that point, and that's how you were able to pay off that land in 2 years?
No, not really. Basically, the simplest way to put it is we found this program where we were living in an apartment in downtown Nashville, my wife and I. And this apartment had a position where if you hosted 3 events a month, you got 75% off your rent, meaning like you put on socials for the apartment complex to build community. And so we took that position, and I was writing songs. So I had a really small salary from my from Warner Chappell, the songwriting company that I was writing for. And we lived really simply, and we didn't have kids. We had one on the way at this point. And we just lived so minimally, but not cheaply. I don't know how to, explain the difference really, but it wasn't like we were eating canned chicken and rice still, right? Like we were living.
You spent money on what was important, but you didn't splurge on the things that weren't, important.
Absolutely. We're still going out to celebrate things and we're living a normal life, but we were finding a way creatively to do it really affordably. And so instead of, spending, $1,500 a month on rent, we're spending $650, I think is what we were paying, which is hard to believe now because everything's so expensive. But we just got creative and then took the excess, and instead of, upping our lifestyle, we put it into this glorified savings account called Raw Land.
So you mentioned that it checked a lot of the boxes that you're, that seem to line up with like your grandpa's criteria when he bought land. Can you just talk about some of that? Like, what were some of the things that were checking? What were some of the boxes you were checking with this piece of land when you made the offer?
Yeah, the first. This is kind of something that I've learned, something that was mentioned, but I've found really useful, is following the school systems. Like that was the layman's term, super simple way for me to identify an area that I thought was going to do well over the next 10 years. Right. And that was the only barometer I had for moving to a different state and buying real estate. I didn't know the areas like I do in Oklahoma. So I followed the school system, and I knew that Williamson County had great school systems, and there were towns in that county that were still pretty undeveloped and had a lot of room for growth. And that's kind of how I identified Fairview. And then once I identified the town, I had a couple conversations with my grandfather, and pretty simple things that rang true was like he always looked at buying properties that have hardwood trees on them, like instant rebates almost, because you can have those trees thinned and make some money on that, and somebody will come in and buy those. So that was one tip. Obviously, this piece of property wasn't big enough for that to really play a big factor, but it did have some hardwoods on it. So that's what caught my eye initially. And then it was in an area that was, the roads are nice and everything is starting to, you can tell that there's some younger couples moving out that way, but it was very early on. So between always purchase the mineral rights and some just stuff that I've heard growing up from grandpa, coupled with following the school system, that was enough to get me interested in this piece of land. And then I looked around at the people that were buying properties on either side of me and talking with them. Like one of the properties on the left of us sold, went and talked to this guy, and he was a pretty successful guy in real estate. And honestly, just being naive and asking a bunch of dumb questions, he kind of gave me his rundown on why he was purchasing this piece of land. And it just added to my confidence in the property. So I think doing your due diligence of like who's in the area, and it always helped me to talk to the neighbors and get a feel for the area too.
Once you buy this land, what do you do with it?
I've done absolutely nothing with it. Honestly, we bought it because my wife and I wanted to move to the country. We were living in downtown Nashville, but my wife is from Coppell, Texas, which is like a suburb of Dallas. And I just remember going, man, before we move out to the country and like try to go build a house or buy a house or whatever, let's make sure that we like it first. So the next purchase was we bought a primary residence on the outskirts of town in the country, and found out, I'm glad we did that, because we found out that my wife didn't love living in the country as much as we thought she would. It's Chip and Joanna Gaines make it look very appealing on TV, but it's not always what it seems. So, but at the time, we had our first kid, and we didn't have any family in the area. And so it was, living in the country was kind of isolating. So we just kind of set it aside, and the property taxes on that piece of property relative to, rental houses and Airbnbs and those sort of things, it's just so low. And once it's paid off, it's just the easiest, most low maintenance thing to hold on to.
So failed dreams made of shiplap, and what you learned.
Exactly. And don't trust HGTV. So
that's in general. Yes. Every single person that wants to become a real estate agent sees it on HGTV. People that look at renovating houses, it's nothing nothing like that at all. And we all know that it's nothing like that, but yet we still get sucked into thinking it. So that's funny. You actually move out to the country and you're like, oh, there's a septic tank. There's mosquitoes everywhere. When I have to go to the grocery store, it's like 35 minutes each way,
Bro,
right? Like,
that was the worst part.
there's no Chipotle's anywhere.
Oh my gosh.
And this is mainly a phase of life thing. Like my wife would thrive in the country, given the right circumstances, but new baby, isolated, no family, no friends, new city. Like it was just tough.
Yeah. You need formula, you need diapers, you need Robitussin. Like that's a whole event to have to go pick up that stuff. I could totally, versus when your kids are older and they could go ride a horse or ride a dirt bike around or go fishing somewhere close.
Yeah. Just kick them out and you say, go play.
Driving in a vehicle with the newborn for 30 to 60 minutes is also, whew.
Yeah. We learned that one firsthand too. Yeah. That was, interesting season.
So you mentioned short-term rentals in there. What did you end up moving on to after this land?
Yeah. So living in Nashville, we bought the land. Then we, tested out living in the country by buying our primary in Dixon, Tennessee. Then the next purchase that we made was a rental property in downtown Nashville. I was, basically going back and forth. We were transitioning to living in Texas, right? So I'm coming back and forth from Nashville to Texas and Texas to Nashville, and I don't have a place to stay. So I'm again back to sleeping on friends' couches, and we had rented out our primary residence in Dixon, so that became a rental. The land's still sitting there, so I'm staying at a friend's house one night, crashing on their couch, and it's a tiny little place, like maybe 700, 800 square feet. And they loved where they lived, but they wanted more space. And so I was, talking with them and basically said, okay, well, if you don't mind me asking, how much do you pay in rent? And they told me, and I was like, man, that seems like a bit much for the tiny spot that you guys have here. And, would you guys be willing to move? And they were like, yeah, actually, we're trying to find a place that's bigger. We just can't find one. And so I made a deal with them. I said, if you move into the house that I buy, I'll let you pick the area. Like if we both agree on an area, we'll buy the house. I'll let you live there. I'll match your rent. And then you just let me have a room to stay in when I'm in town, which was every month. And they were like, deal. So after a few months of shopping around, we ended up buying a house a little bit north of Nashville, inside the river though, inside the Cumberland River. So on the downtown side, bought a little house, and that was the first time that I accidentally walked into house hacking. And it was great. It served a purpose for me. It helped them. It was just like a mutually beneficial thing, that since then, I wish that I would have learned about that prior to being married, because that's a whole different dynamic when you have a spouse involved in that. But that's one thing that I keep telling all my buddies is like, man, just buy a house and fill it with your buddies and have them pay rent, and then move out and fill it with that third friend to take your spot, and then go do it again. It's just so simple, and you get the benefit of living there for a couple of years as your primary and moving on, and tax implications are all different. And
there's something I think really powerful about you splitting a $250 room, sleeping on a trundle bed, eating chicken and rice, that lights a fire under you to go work hard because you're not comfortable. Pain is like the most powerful motivator anyone could have. So everyone wakes up with a dream in their heart of some sort, but you went and chased it because sleeping on a trundle bed, listening to another guy snore and fart all night isn't the most fun experience to have, right? There's something that's compelling you to go work harder that actually probably, if you look back, helped you on your investing journey, helped you on your music journey. You got to have some kind of fight in you. And when you're too comfortable, you get a W-2 job, they put the golden handcuffs on you, all your money's going to rent in this apartment complex. You just get into a rut of doing the same thing all the time. And then when you get out of the house hacking where you're sleeping on the trundle bed, now you provide that to somebody else. Now someone else gets that fire that they're getting to save money. They can move out of the house at 20 instead of staying at home till they're 30 because they can't afford housing, and they just complain about it on Twitter all day. It's a better model to build. And that's what I just love about what you're saying. You look like you were a comment there.
Yeah. I what you're saying about pain being or maybe discomfort is even a better word for it, being a motivator. Yeah, I mean, both in real estate, but primarily in music. Like we should just put a big disclaimer on this whole thing. Real estate is something that I do completely on the side. And that's another point that I just want to, share with friends and peers is like, this doesn't have to be your primary passion in order for you to succeed here and in order for it to be worth your time. But music, I've been discomforted so many times and it's led to the biggest breakthroughs. For example, during COVID, my wife and I were moving to Texas, right? 2019. And I got dropped from my publishing deal, which is essentially getting fired. And I've never been fired from anything in my life. I got dropped from my publishing deal. And the only thing that was keeping us in Nashville was that contract. And so we had our first baby and our second one was on the way. And we just decided, you know what? We want to raise our family close to grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins. And we're going to move to Texas. And everybody in the music field was like, hey, the worst thing you could ever do for your music career is to leave Music City. And we decided we're going to work twice as hard from Texas. We'll let God figure out the rest. And we moved. And as soon as we got there, the whole world shuts down for a couple of years. And music is no longer a viable way to make an income. So I got faced with a couple of different things. One of them was I got to choose between unemployment or taking a new job and learning how to do something new. So I ended up going to work at a couple different places, worked at a motorcycle shop, ultimately ended up landing at a pavement company, which is why I called my record Blacktop. There's a whole backstory there. But what ended up happening was in a season of life where I had very little income and our savings was just completely depleted, I had a property that I was able to sell. And the day that my second daughter was born, we closed on this property. And it was the first time I'd ever sold anything. And I just remember going, this saved us. This put us in a position to survive. And, I hope that, an era like COVID never happens again. And I hope that a bunch of people that are listening to this weren't affected and in ways that drastic, but it completely totaled everything for us and took us back to square zero. And if it were not for real estate, my number one hit, my debut record on a major label, my touring career, the way that I'm able to provide for my family would have been dead in the water. So it really opened up some opportunities for me to just keep my dream alive during a really tough time. And, a couple of years later, things start opening up again and I'm able to hustle and we have some rental income that whole time. But it definitely was the thing that kept things possible.
All right. So let's recap the portfolio that you've built, by the way, as a side project with your music career exploding. So what's it look like now?
Yeah. So kind of in order of purchases, we bought that raw land at like $112,000, paid that off in a couple years. That thing's roughly doubled. We ended up using that later on down the line, like I said, on that to collateralize the down payment on the Airbnb that we just sold. We bought a rental property in downtown Nashville for $319,000, and that would go for upwards of $425,000, $450,000 now. And we're continuing to rent that because we have a good interest rate on it and we have some of the best tenants ever. And that's a completely hassle-free, profitable, non-headache property, which is kind of what I'm going for at this point in my career. I think there'll come a time where I'm open to and have more time to really invest and take on some more difficult projects. But we have our primary residence in Frisco, Texas. We bought it 505. And Frisco continues to explode. So who knows where that one will end up. I've already got out of order. Apologies, but we sold a property in Dixon, Tennessee. We purchased it at $269, did nothing to it. A couple years later, sold it at $325. Some of that is, luck of the timing, but again, we followed the school system. We found a brand new house that wasn't selling for some reason, went in, put in an offer, got it under asking. And then, I got to exit. That was that sale that, came through during COVID that we just really needed. So that was perfect timing. And then what I've learned recently here in real estate is, since our music career has grown and we've started to make more money, we've had to look for some opportunities to find some tax breaks. And so we bought a cabin in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, which is where all of my family's land and cattle operation is. We bought that for $675,000. It's a short-term rental cabin. It's beautiful. It's brand new. And what we did was we did a cost seg analysis on this property, and they found way more deductions. And for people like me, like layman's terms, a cost seg analysis basically allows you to depreciate the cabinets and the things that are going to depreciate and deteriorate faster than 30 years. So we were able to do that with some of the additional income that we have coming in now. And it builds our real estate portfolio, but it also lightens our tax burden, and it just helps everything overall. And then the last piece is we have like a really passive investment in downtown Nashville, where we put, we put $25,000 into a purchase of 3.5 acres on Demonbreun, which is one of the main roads in Nashville and downtown. There's a bunch of bars and commercial buildings there now. They're going to essentially let the leases expire and go up and build multifam. And so then we'll have the opportunity to buy into that again on the multifam side, or we can exit, or we can just let our initial investment ride. And we're learning. Like I just keep getting my feet wet in all of these different little sectors of real estate. And I think the next thing I really want to try is, my buddy and I that bought that Airbnb, we want to go into some multi-unit, multifam, something together. Cause we're just learning it's really hard to buy individual properties right now that cash flow without being very, very hands-on. And that's not a position I find myself capable of at the moment. So we're looking to learn more, right? And just take another swing in some other area and keep growing.
Well, that's awesome, man. That is quite the journey. I mean, I know you think of it as sort of a side thing, but given the success and everything like that, I think it's really encouraging for a lot of people at home to listen to this and understand that you don't have to do real estate full time to to build wealth and use that wealth to get you out of tough financial points if you ever need it. So it's really cool, and I appreciate you coming on to the show and sharing that with us, man. Yeah, man. Well, thank you guys for having me. I know that I'm definitely an outlier in this show, but I've listened to a lot of these and thought to myself, like, man, these people have built these amazing portfolios, but I don't feel like I have anything that's relatable in terms of my life stage or what I have. And so hopefully it just encourages somebody who's on the fence about, taking a swing and going for their first deal. Hopefully it encourages them to realize that you don't have to be as far along as you think you might to pull the trigger the first time.
Well, there's this cookie cutter formula that typically gets sold to people that want to invest in real estate. And it really formed, I feel like, in 2010 after the last crash when everybody was afraid. So they would portray real estate in a way that was less scary, where we would say, buy a property, get a couple $100 a month of cash flow, buy another one, do the same thing, get 50 of them, and then you'll have financial freedom. You have taken advantage of many of the ways that real estate builds wealth and fit it into your life, which is successful in other areas outside of that cookie cutter model. You bought land, which most people would never even consider doing because land doesn't cash flow unless you're using it to raise cattle on or, pump oil out of or something like that. Well, that land has doubled in price. So even though you haven't made cash flow every single month, you made a lot of money from that real estate. Well, if you're making money from your music career, you don't need the land to cash flow. You just need to have it in a good area with good schools where it's going to appreciate. Then you bought a short-term rental, which provided some cash flow to make up for some of the other properties that weren't doing as well, but they were appreciating in value. You worked it into an overall financial picture and took advantage of a lot of the equity growth that comes from buying properties below market value and in areas that are growing without being reliant on the cash flow, because you're out there being an entrepreneur in the business sense. That's what I love about the story that you're telling here. You also incorporated hard work and saving cash so that you could invest in real estate rather than saying, well, I'm not willing to sacrifice my lifestyle. I want the deal to just appear at my doorstep and cash flow for me. And if I can't find that, well, then I'm going to move on investing in crypto or something. So everyone listening, A, follow your dream. Corey's a great example of that. B, don't be afraid of being in a position of pain. That's okay. It can actually help motivate you in many ways and create a richer life, which I'm sure helps when it comes to your music writing, which you did for a long time. So let's throw that in a C. Focus on building skills and not just looking for the easy way out. You wrote music for other artists for a long time before you were writing your own songs that were famous. And D, look at the way that real estate does make money and take advantage of that instead of trying to force it to work for what works for you. Mold your life around how you can make some of these things work, and you can have similar results. A great story,
man. Yeah. And just cherry on top, man, that beautifully said. I think that you don't have to, this doesn't have to be your number one passion in life, right? Like it can have a great, supplemental spot in your life that enables you to chase whatever that primary dream is. And it has made all the difference in the world for me. I mean, even recently just selling this Airbnb while I am heavily reinvesting in my own touring business and going to tour buses and, hiring employees. And, as I'm building a business completely independent of real estate, it's allowing me to reinvest and keep things lean on that side. And I take some of the wins from real estate and I fund my personal life. So it's just going to open doors, and it's going to fuel, those other dreams that you might have, in ways that a lot of things can't. So that's the last thing I had to add to that. But man, David, that was beautiful.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, again, thanks for sharing your story. And I hope if you ever need a couch to crash on, David's couch is always open, my friend.
Beautiful.
If people want to learn more about you, where can they connect with you? Where can they look you up, find all your stuff? Give us the rundown.
Yeah. So my socials on every platform are at Corey Kent, Corey. Every Starbucks barista ever misspells my name, so make sure you get the E. And then, so it's at Corey Kent, and then CoreyKentOfficial.com. You find tour dates, you find merchandise, all that, all the music's there too. And then obviously we're on all the streaming platforms as well. Outside of that, I'm just super grateful that you guys took the time to hear my story, because I just hope somebody out there that's on the fence, this is kind of that differing factor, that defining factor that gets them to make their first move.
One other thing that you and I have in common, in addition to eating boiled chicken and rice and sleeping in other people's rooms, is we have an unnecessary E in our names that throws everyone off. I don't know why there's an E at the end of green. It doesn't mean it's greeny. Stop asking me that. But it's caused me a lot of grief as well. The freaking English throwing unnecessary vowels.
Well, I have a million questions for you guys. I know that the podcast was like you guys hosting, but I have a million questions off camera that I'm going to be sending you, because I feel like I can learn so much from what you guys have done. And obviously the show's awesome. So thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. We'll see if we can get you featured on a Seeing Green episode. We'll do that too. We'll have you ask some questions on there and everyone can see. So please go check out Corey's Blacktop album. Buy that, support him there, and let us know in the comments what you think about Corey's story, which happens to rhyme. Maybe I have a songwriting career in my future as well.
There's a Ian story as well, just in case anyone's wondering.
Rob, where can people find out more about you?
Oh, you can find me over on Instagram at Rob Built, or on Threads if you're trendy, if you're up and up on the old interwebs. You can find me on YouTube primarily over at Rob Built. David, if people want to download your demo, where can they do that?
Yeah, you can look me up everywhere at David Green 24 if you need a ghostwriter. The real estate market's a little tough. Rates are high. It's hard to find deals, so I'm making some extra income there. And go check out my YouTube at David Green 24. I'm live every single Friday night. So we appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for following the podcast. Make sure you like this and share it. Go check out Corey's album, Blacktop. Corey, any last words before we let you get out of here?
No, man, just grateful. Great to talk with you guys. That's all I got.
Oh, awesome.
All right.
This is David Green for Rob Y'all Abasolo signing out.